Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
All right, Mike, we just finished up our time with John Crosby tonight. I mean, he's an amazing guy. What a fun hour we had with him. What stood out to you, and what was your takeaway?
Man, I love this show, and this show is about getting better, and every time I'm with John Crosby, I get better. I love his commitment to his family. John is a true family guy, and you get that vibe from his first answer. He's quick to share the love that he has for his family and what those people mean to John Crosby, and I think that comes out very powerful for our listeners.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think there's recurring themes that we've seen with some of our guests that we've had. We talk about faith, we talk about convictions, and John is all about compassion, right? He has compassion for his own family. You and I have been witness to that compassion that he's had on us, I think, at times, and just compassion on people in general. It's pretty inspiring stuff.
Yeah, and that compassion is one of the reasons why John means so much to me and why I was looking forward to this episode. And it just so happens that that's where we're at in the world right now, right? The world needs that compassion, and I think that having John as our guest was perfect timing. Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, hopefully we can listen to it tonight. Our listeners can take something away, and we can all look at somehow we can be better. Enjoy the show.
These days, Tyler Gould, there's a lot of things to talk about.
There's a lot. Some are more pleasant than others, I think.
Yeah, a lot of things happening right now that are concerning. As a middle-aged, middle-class white man looking out on the United States of America right now, I'm trying to understand. Right, I'm trying to understand what people are going through. I'm trying to understand why people are doing what we're doing. I'm not gonna lie. I feel a lot of rage, and I feel like I could easily be doing some of the things that are being done. But
yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of different thoughts on it, and most of them I think are right along or in line with what you're talking about, but. I think it's unfortunate that the way that what we're seeing on the news, I think takes away from the message that we really need to hear to a certain degree. You know what I mean? I think we need change, and maybe that's through less looting. I get like the outrage and the anger for sure. I just think that, and I just wish there was some way to affect change and make it happen quickly. Unfortunately, it's 2020, and we've been picking at this problem for a long time, and I use the word picking purposefully because I don't know that we've ever attacked it in the right way that we should.
And that's part of what I see. Things happening to the scale that they're happening, that doesn't feel like it feels like we're done picking at it.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope that there's enough people that are of the mindset that change needs to happen, and that I listened to someone, I can't remember who it was, that they were talking, and they just said, anybody can be a leader. We don't need to have people in suits stand up in front of microphones to affect change. Anybody can be a leader. And I agree with that. And I think that there's a lot of people that are doing that and standing up and trying to do that. I just hope that we can You know, it's I always have this vision. You know, have you ever seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia? Tell me you've seen.
I have not. I have not seen that movie.
Mike Freeman.
Really? Lawrence of Arabia?
Oh my gosh, dude! One of my favorite movies of all time.
I've been sleeping on Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, you got to carve out like 5 hours, dude. It's one of those crazy epics shot in the 1960s, man. Peter O'Toole, it's phenomenal, dude. All right, so I'll give you a little bit of a. Man, I'm gonna have to do a little spoiler here, but don't worry, it's 5 hours.
I mean, I'm right now as you speak. I'm grabbing the old Spirit Journal. And I'm making a note that I got to watch Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia. And I'm telling you right now, like, you're going to watch it, and it's literally 4 hours long, dude. And I might be shy on the number. It's long, man.
Okay, sell me on why I got to dedicate 4 hours of my life to watch Lawrence of Arabia.
First of all, the acting
and how it applies to 2020.
Okay, so here's it's all about England's involvement in the Middle East post World War I, okay, and kind of how they're trying to get a foothold in the area and take control of that area. All right, and the whole movie is about uniting these tribes. Okay. So what you got to do here, Mike, is you've got to find a copy. Go down to your local Blockbuster and get a copy of Lawrence of Arabia. All right. So here's the premise. Okay, England, they're trying to unite tribes in the Middle East. Okay, and it's an impossible task, right? All these tribes are warring, but at the very end, this character goes by the name Lawrence of Arabia. Okay. That's what they call him. He gets all these tribes together in the same room. It's like his final feat is success, right? And he thinks they're going to come to these major decisions and be united in a purpose. And he stands up and introduces the tribes, and they just start bickering and fighting, and they cannot come to a consensus on anything. And he turns and walks out of the room disappointed. And so how does this relate to 2020? I started referencing Lawrence of Arabia because I thought I hope that there's an opportunity for those that are trying to affect change to come to a consensus about what's the best way to do this and not become like warring tribes trying to push forward an agenda. Because the only agenda that matters at this point, in my humble opinion, is compassion, love, and mercy. That's it, right? Everything else, if we focused on those things, we would be golden, right? We could overcome almost anything if that was our focus. But when we start to let pride and other outside influences push us, it becomes a different conversation altogether.
All right, Tyler, I'm going to push pause on you. John Crosby, welcome to the Richest Man in Town podcast. How are you, brother?
I love it. I'm doing great, man, my friend. And I love listening about Lawrence of Arabia. That was awesome.
Have you seen that movie?
A long time ago.
I have not seen that movie, and he's telling me that it's holding all the answers, maybe.
Holds all the answers.
Hold on. I would not refute Tyler.
Yeah. That's quite an endorsement, John. I don't know if he's worthy of that endorsement.
I have that. I just captured that soundbite. It's going on everything I own right now.
Oh, that's right.
He's actually going to make it like the Staples easy button when his wife says something. He's going to be like, boom. I would not refute Tyler.
That's right.
I love it. I don't know if that's a secret to a happy marriage, though, Tyler. I'll be honest.
So I would say to you, Mike Freeman, that you need to check that movie out. It's a commitment.
Well, the interesting thing is I am committed. I am committed to doing whatever I got to do to look at 2020 and the issues that are there. I did not think that the answer would be Lawrence of Arabia. Not gonna.
There's a lot of answers came from Lawrence of Arabia in my world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, things that I've been wrestling with is having two kids at home. Right.
Yeah.
I know that this is historical. I can feel the historical significance of it. I think that the question is my role as a parent in helping them understand how I'm taking a stand. Yeah. And what does that taking a stand look like? What action do I take? Do I go to a local march? And what happens if I go to a local march with my kids and all of a sudden it turns to something else? Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, Mike, those are questions that I think have to be answered in different ways. We got you now, John. You're just sideways, but
Yeah.
but you're here. There we
There
go.
we go.
There we go.
All right.
Wow.
And he's got a haircut. He's ready for the video.
I cut it for you guys. Now I'm looking, Mike, you got a haircut. You were looking pretty stylish there for a while.
I did. I couldn't handle it anymore.
Mike's like the human chia pet. It's like you give him a glass of water in a couple of weeks, the guy's got 8 inches of hair and a full beard, you know? So,
that's not hair, that's seal fur.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know what? I'd give it to you, John. I'd take your look and I'd give it to you in a heartbeat.
Oh no.
I think there's a life principle there, right? The person that has the hair doesn't want it. The person that doesn't have it wishes they'd had it. So
wishes they had it. Every time I burn my bald head, Mike, I wish I had it.
Oh my gosh,
John, hey, welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. We have been having a conversation. Obviously, it's what the world is talking about right now, right? Just this George Floyd situation and the aftermath and the state of our world right now. And I don't know, you have kids at home, and you know, what are you having? What are conversations looking like in the Crosby home on this?
You know, it's interesting you say that. I'd hope that everybody's having these kind of conversations around the dinner table or whatever, wherever it may be, just before bed or whatever you have a chance to talk about it. It's just interesting to take the perspective of, you know, I don't know the full details of it, but it looked very egregious and wrong. Yet 2 wrongs don't make a right. You know, these riotings, and that's not really, you're losing your message. You know, and that's what we've talked about. It's like, it's unfortunate they took a situation where there's a great message to be sent, that there needs to be more love, more kindness, more compassion, to eliminate any kind of racial discrimination, you know, that exists. Let's not bury our head in the sand. But then when you take it to the extreme, you lose that message, you lose that point. And I think that's the danger here, is that they're losing their message. And that's what I would say is, and it's not really them. It's just these groups they've entered in, and they've taken advantage of an opportunity. I think I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's kind of the discussion we've had in our home. That discrimination is wrong. That what they did was wrong. What that officer did, or those that stood by and watched. You know, there should have been some human compassion there. It was over a $20 bill,
yeah,
possibly, allegedly. Nobody deserves that. And then what was wrong, and a lot of tension built up, but then it exploded. And I think there are those that are taking advantage of it. And that's the sad part, is that the real message is getting lost.
I would agree that there is that sinister side, right? That is coming in and exploiting the situation. I do like that word explosion, and I like the energy behind that explosion. I do think, like to Tyler's point though, channeling that. Right. I mean, when you hear, because looking at some of the things that are out there in that social media platform, and you know, Tyler, you sent me a text today from, was it Mandela?
Yeah.
That's a guy I want to listen to. Right.
Yeah.
That's a guy I want to listen to, because he's false. He's imprisoned.
Yes.
And he's given up decades of his life, and he comes out talking about forgiveness. Right. That's the person I want to talk to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And on one hand, I can identify, I think, with the anger, you know, that everyone feels, right? And
Absolutely.
just, you see, like you mentioned, John, you watch that and you're just disgusted. You're just horrified that here we are in 2020 and we can watch someone die really based on the color of that person's skin. And it's just hard to imagine that that's where we're at. And it's just sad. And it's terrible. But yeah, here's that quote from Mandela. He says, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Right? And I just think that's
powerful. Consider the source, right?
Yes,
consider the
right.
source.
Yeah, considering the source, right. I think it's interesting. I heard a quote today. Hopefully, I don't know if it's, you always wonder whether it's accurate, but, his brother had said, that George would not want this to happen, would not want things to have been handled this way. And
I watched that.
Yeah.
It's a powerful, I mean, it was on the nightly news this evening before I left the house to run some errands. And he said, look, if I'm not out here,
right.
If I'm not out here doing what you're doing, I'm the one who is most justified in this country to be doing what you're doing. And I'm not out here doing it. And I've always thought the solution to our problems comes from those closest to the problem. Right? So if he's saying that what you're doing is not going to get my brother back, what you're doing is not going to give you the things that you need, man, that's powerful.
Yeah, it's a rough situation. I'm not, it's sad, but it's probably, at the same time, it's sad, but it's probably a needed thing right now. Not obviously the violence and those kind of things, but I think a national conversation that has some energy behind it, where we're impassioned about it and not just talking. It's not just political talking points, but we're passionate about it as a collective people. Hopefully that will impact some change, right?
But that passion needs to carry us through to action, right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
And it needs to carry us through the next news cycle.
Yeah.
Right? You can already feel the shift, like, oh, all of these protests are violating social distancing, and now what's that going to do for our COVID numbers and all of this, and it's almost like you can already start to feel a shift to the next story. Man. And the next story, that can't happen. Right? Yeah. This can't just go away.
It's like coronavirus never happened, right? I mean, that's the reality, and that's the unfortunate reality of the world we live in, where we're looking for the next headline, and that's unfortunate. But I don't want to be cynical here. I'm going to think positively that we're going to do something, that something good will come out of all of this.
You cued in on. I'm going to take off on a word that you shared, Tyler. That word compassion. Gentlemen, what does that word mean to you?
Whoa, man, that's a good. You know what, John? If you want to jump in, I'll let you. But
I'm actually. Well, I mean, I'll throw this out there.
Compassion.
I think, John, really quick. This show is our little pet project, John.
Right.
We're selfish here. Tyler and I are kind of a wreck. And we're trying to bring in great people that we know that can teach us how to be great. And John, I think you're one of the most compassionate people I know. And it just so happens. No, hey, listen, you can shrug it off like the best of them. You're on our show. You got to take it.
And John, I would echo what Mike says. I mean, when Mike and I, we've been kicking this show around for a long time, talking about doing this show. And one of the things I told Mike was that this, for me, I'm really good. One thing I'm really good at is making everything about me. Right. So this show for me is about me trying to figure out how to be better. And, one of the things I told Mike is I want to have people on the show that I think have already impacted my life in a positive way, and 2, I want to glean more from, and 3, I think it's worth sharing these people with a wider audience. And Mike and I both feel that way about you. So we're just grateful for you.
Well, thank you. Mike, I'm going to take a stab at my definition of compassion, and it's going to come from a religious perspective, but it's like, can we view others through the Savior's eyes? And how would he view other people, and how does he view us? And it takes a great deal of empathy, takes a great deal of forgiveness, and not being judgmental. You don't know what that person has ever gone through. You haven't walked in their shoes. And it really, if we step back and we look at people from a different perspective and try to understand versus judge, then I think we begin to glimpse compassion and start to understand it a little bit better. That's just me speaking. But
I like that, John. I like that sort of that formula of forgiveness, not judging, and having empathy gets us to that point where we can start to exercise compassion on some level.
I like the relationship or the connection to the Savior, right? We have scriptural records that say his bowels were filled with mercy. His bowels were filled with compassion, and he did something with it. And I think that's the difference, right? Compassion is you walk by and you see a person down, and you don't just go and sit with him and hear him out and then go about your business. You sit with him with the intent to help him out of it.
Right.
And that's what we want from friendship. That's what we want to, as dads, as husbands, right? Like compassion should drive us. And on a national stage, man, could you imagine what a little compassion would do right now?
Yeah, it'd be huge.
And you've seen it in your posts. I've seen the officer in Louisiana who was separated from his force, and the protesters circled around him, and protected him and created a little barrier for him. It's out there when the law enforcement officer takes a knee in solidarity with the protesters.
Yeah. Right.
So I mean, we've seen it, but we've also seen the opposite. But I agree, John. I love your response to that question.
I think too, Mike, that I love Henry B. Eyring said that, and I'm going to totally paraphrase here, but he said that if we treated everyone that we met as if they were going through the most difficult time in their life, we'd be right more than half the time, right? And I think about that all the time, like the idea of how we approach people, just in general. I think that sometimes we feel like, or I'll speak for myself, but I feel like if I feel like compassion is warranted in this circumstance, I will attempt to exercise it, right? But I feel like that quote from Irene is more about approaching everyone with a level of compassion at all times.
Well, you shared in a couple episodes ago, Tyler, I think you shared that, there's this myth that life is amazing and you go through these patches of rough times, when really the opposite is probably true. Life is rough times, and occasionally you go through these moments of sunshine, right? And that reminds me, my wife texted me this the other day, this Gordon B. Hinckley quote, and I love this, right? Anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time. The fact is, most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up to be just people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration, right? Like, and he goes on and just says, look, it's about managing your expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he talks about a train ride, right?
Yeah.
It's bumpy and rough and
right.
Smoke filled, and every once in a while you get to look at the beautiful vistas.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I think that there's some truth there.
Mm-hmm.
So John, let me get into our guest a little bit, Tyler, if that's okay.
Yeah.
A couple of buddies of yours reach out and say they got a show called Richest Men in Town, and they want you to be a guest. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it makes me think. All right, I'll do anything to help these two guys. Hopefully help. Because
we're so desperate.
Two guys that I admire greatly. Two guys that are just awesome, and are taking on a project that I think is worthwhile. You know, after you question why me. You know.
Well, as Tyler alluded earlier, John, this show's been on our hearts every time we got together. Every time Tyler and I get together, we'd kick this idea around, right? And the premise comes from George Bailey. It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah,
right. And at the end, when Harry Bailey toasts him as the richest man in town, and I think that Tyler, I don't want to speak for you, but we're in this together, so I will.
Yeah.
John, I would put you up there on a personal Mount Rushmore of influence to me, and it was a short guest list before your name popped up, and so I'm really grateful for the time. I know you're a busy guy, you got family and you got things, but I appreciate the time that you're giving us tonight, and really it's about lifting up the hood and looking in on the choices that you made that puts you in this position where you have this faith, you have this family, you have these things that are admirable about your life, and maybe looking and seeing if there's some lessons, some nuggets that we can put in our pocket from our conversation that will help Tyler and I try to get a clue.
Yeah.
Kelly Freeman's really excited that I'm talking to John Crosby, because every time I do, I'm a better man, and she's like, you really need it. In a nutshell, man, I don't need the bio. I don't need exactly, this is your life and on this day you were born, but who's John Crosby? Tell us a little bit about, where you're from, you got kids, so let's start there. Yeah. Talk to me about your kids.
Let's start there. Yeah, I've got 5 children, 4 daughters and a son. And the four daughters are older. They range in ages from 27 down to 19. And then I have a son about 15 years old. He's not about 15 years old. So there's a little gap there between the 19-year-old and the 15-year-old. But and I grew up basically like an only child, because my sister came along many years later, like 22 years later, and I grew up with a good family, a hardworking family. Mike, I can relate. You grew up in Vina, and I grew up. My parents grew up my dad was a cotton picker. My mom picked fruit. So very humble background, and then they ended up finding their way in LA. And I remember a lot through construction. My dad kind of followed the work, and that's kind of where I remember a lot of my growing up years and my youth is in Pasadena. And, through various jobs, brought me up here to Redding. And it's been a great journey. Life's been full of ups and downs though, but the biggest thing that I've learned, you so far, and my father-in-law, and he lived this philosophy. He goes, it's not what happens to you in life that matters. And I think we've all heard that quote, but it's how you handle it. And that's how you're going to be judged. And I admired that man so much, because this was a man who was the vice president of Sears, worked in the Sears Tower, head of real estate. And then at the unfortunate age of 50, chased some dreams. Some people lured him away to, with a brighter, shinier apple. Then the recession hit back in the late 80s and early 90s. And then he lost his job. And then on top of losing his job, the man has a stroke, Mike. Mm. And he has a stroke, and for not even the same kind of man at all. You would never, my kids will never know this man, and I'm sad to say, other than through our memories. But for about 27, 28 years, this man lived with this debilitating stroke, and he was a greeter in Blackfoot, Idaho, at Walmart. Wow. And I thought, and because he had, the stroke had taken its effects on his personality, and I said, people walk into that Walmart every day and they don't know how smart this man really was once in his life, that he was actually the vice president of Sears and worked in, and now, you know, you look at him and you just never, you judge him. You think, oh, I don't know who this guy, goofy guy is. You know, he's sitting there and he's not very bright. But he lived his philosophy that he taught me. He was a good man till the very end, you know, and it seemed like that's kind of the way I feel like, you know, we're going to have bumps, and really what it amount more bumps than we think. And when the water's calm, enjoy it, because there is a storm on the horizon. I promise you there's a storm on the horizon.
Yeah, pedal downhill is what I've heard, right?
Right, pedal down.
Pedal downhill.
But the beauty of those things is it makes you focus on what's really important. You know, what really in my life, of all these things, whether you may have accumulated or worked for or accolades that people give you, really the biggest nugget or the gem is your family to me, is your personal relationship with the Savior and your family. And when you really drill down to it, if anybody really reads the scriptures, I mean, and this is, again, I don't know your podcast, but who in the scriptures didn't have a very difficult time? I don't remember reading anybody that had a blissful life. I mean, they were faithful and they overcame challenges. I can't imagine Moses going from, you know, being a prince in Egypt to wandering for 40 years in the desert, you know, hungry and people complaining, being a very, you know, a fun thing, or Abraham, you know, having to, you know, the challenges.
If the Savior gave us the example of a perfect life, not one day,
not one day
was ever easy.
Not one day. You're right. Now that's exactly.
Yeah.
You got
okay. The real secret behind every man we've interviewed, Tyler, I don't know if you've acknowledged this or connected those dots, but the real secret to any kind of success or richness in life is really come down to who you marry.
Oh, it really is.
I admire Jenny Crosby.
Oh, she's a gem.
Just amazing woman. So you talked about her dad a little bit. Can you talk to me about how Jenny Crosby comes into your life and what she means to you?
You know, I've had the pleasure of knowing Jenny since we were 15 and 14 years old. And I was 16, I think she was 14, almost 15. But I always remember my friends saying, you know, that's the kind of girl you marry, not the kind of girl you date. True story, my good friends.
Those are the tears, right? Those are the tears.
Right. Awesome. I'm thinking, what are you guys saying? That's the girl you want to date, you know?
I love it.
And so I just always had my eyes on her because I knew Jenny was going to be a wonderful mother. And I was blessed enough to kind of look past the hormones of youth and see that I really do want a great mother for my children. And I think that was a blessing or an epiphany, hopefully, that, you know, God, you know, enlightened my mind a little bit at that age to realize that what's important. And so she exhibited all the characteristics that I was looking for, or I would want in a wife, you know, later on. And I'm like, why waste my time with the others? You know. And
how long you guys been married?
Well,
I won't put you on the spot.
No, 91, almost 30 years, right? 91, yeah. Was that? Yeah, a little over, almost 30 years, 29 years, going on 30.
Well, you got any advice?
My
for
math
us?
right? Yeah, right.
You got any advice for us? You probably could write volumes.
Let me.
We should probably put her on.
You know, and I'll tell you advice that I'm not to say that we never disagreed on anything. We've disagreed on a lot of things, but when it comes down to it, we love and respect each other's decisions, and we're able to communicate well with each other. You know, and just we always emphasize how much we love each other. In fact, just today we had that conversation because it was me. I said something snippy.
Uh-oh.
she said, she goes, you know, that really hurt my feelings.
Oh man, I like it.
I said, you know, I realized it, and I actually said it to hurt your feelings. I apologize.
Yeah.
Said,
Oh my gosh, I love that.
but I want you to know, at the end of the day, I
Owning
love you
it.
to death.
Yeah.
I love you to death, and I would never, you know, never for a moment take me serious, Jenny. I said I shouldn't. I'm working on that part of my personality. You're here to refine me, and I need that refined. But
you know what I love about that, John, is that this is sort of like the point of the podcast is this idea of constantly adjusting and changing and refining ourselves and finding ways to no matter where we're at or how good we think we're doing, is to be introspective and look at ourselves and say, how can we adjust and be different and be better, you know?
yeah.
But yeah, I want to ask you a question. You know, you've got 4 girls,
Right.
27 to 19, right? Is that the right age?
Right. That's right. Uh-huh.
Okay. So Mike and I have some kids that are coming up on some big things, right? Mike's got a graduate here that's his oldest is about to graduate high school. I've got a daughter on a mission for our church, and a son getting ready to go on a mission. And
awesome.
so talk to us about sort of how you and Jenny worked together as a team raising your family, and what was that like?
You know, as you know, we had our roles, and you know, we were fortunate enough when the kids were younger that Jenny was able to stay at home, you know, and put a lot of effort. And you know, you got to love our wives, because there's, you know, whether they work or whether they don't work, but the reward for motherhood is now where you guys are at. When you see these kids who have made good choices, and even if they don't, that you keep loving them, but that the reward is now as they grow up. But when they're younger, those are rough years. Let's not lie about it. You know, there's a lot of precious years in there, but you know, you have to, you know, heaven bless our wives for being able to be that patient and that loving. And you know, as we're out at work, they're with our children daily, and they're going to be the biggest influence in our children's lives, whether we like it or not. They're going to be a major influence on their lives. So,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, you know, we talked earlier.
And so it really is team effort.
Yeah.
I feel. Go ahead.
I think that we talked earlier
in the show
about the environment that we live in now, right? And sort of the crazy world that we live in. And that, you know, even though your girls anyway are grown and they're out of the house for the most part, right? They were with you in a time that was just as crazy, right? We're not talking that far off. I mean, raising kids in today's world is a difficult thing. So how do you balance keeping your kids on a path and instructing them and sort of training them in this way of compassion that we were talking about earlier?
Right. Well, our kids are incredible at watching us. I don't know if you guys noticed that in your families, but they watch us, and they watch our examples. I think the biggest thing that they see is how do we interact with each other, because they see that on a daily basis, and they have to see you be unified but real. And I apologize to my kids, especially just like I apologize to my wife when I reflect and I say, you know what, I didn't handle that appropriately. Yeah. I want them to know it's okay to apologize, that it's important to apologize. And then the other thing that, you know, your example, if they see you, and you guys are great examples of this, and I'm not just saying this because you're my friends, but they see you working and serving others, then that, and that you're hardworking, they inherit that. I think they know, they want to be like that. You know, they're all going to go through those stages, of course. You know, some will rebel more than others, but as long as there's a love and respect and there's an open communication, I think what's great about you know, if you're blessed enough to have the mother and the father and team parenting, is that one of you will click with that child. Maybe the other one doesn't resonate, but the other one will step in. And then between the two of you, you can touch all of those touch points, I call them, that need that helps them through those rough patches in life. And there's going to be many rough patches for them. Let's Mike, you're in high school, you teach, you taught high school, you taught junior high. You know what those kids are going through, you know, that it's rough. And
John, if I could just cut you off a little bit, I'm just thinking of all of the advice that through the years that I've known you, that you've given me, that has been very timely. It has been what I needed when my kids needed me to step up and be a good dad. And there's been a couple of things that you have shared that really has helped me, because it's not easy. I mean, I've shared openly before. Right. I'm looking for patterns because I didn't have a model, right? I had a single mom that was busting it and was doing everything she could to raise me. And I put that poor woman through hell. You know, she's I don't believe in, we don't necessarily have the saints thing going on in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but my mom's a saint, you know, like, and my fear, honestly, is that my kids might put me through the same thing. So we're getting in. We talked about the kids and the transitions that our kids are going through. John, can I ask you this? I have a kid who's getting ready to leave, and I can't help but ask if I've done enough. Right? Can you help me walk through that transition as they leave?
Welcome to the club. I like it.
Yeah, you know, it is scary. There's just no doubt when you see, you know, in my case, these girls drive off down the driveway, you know, and you're waving goodbye, and you realize they're truly on their own now. You know, that not on their own, they're going to always call home and they're going to stay in touch, but you don't have that daily sit down at dinner and that daily, I see you every day. At least we have technology when we could call and we could stay in touch, which thank goodness is just not letter writing or a phone call. You can FaceTime them, but you realize they truly have no one watching over them constantly, like a parent, you know, like you would, like you guys are so in touch with your children. But I think, how do you know, Mike? I think that's where the faith comes in, and I'm going to be really up front with you. I have one child. I don't know, you know, what kind of decisions he'll make when he leaves the home. I'm nervous about that, but I do hope that the gospel will, or, you know, what he's been taught in the house will resonate with him. And that eventually, if he does lose his way, that he'll come back home, that he'll circle back around and realize, hey, this made mom and dad happy. This made my siblings happy. And it's a tough one for us as parents, you know,
and
because
John,
we love them so much.
All of my eggs are in that basket. You know, I think of Enos.
Yeah.
And I think of the words of his father, right? He's in the wilderness, and you know, we'll put it in the show notes for those that don't know who Enos or the Book of Mormon is. You should, but you know, our kids are going to be in the wilderness someday, and hopefully the words of
yes, they
are. Our words are going to be bouncing around in their heads, and when they need it, they'll grab onto it, and it'll be a sure thing to grab onto.
And Mike, maybe there's a pattern there, right? If we can march down the road of the scriptures here for a second, but if it can give us any solace, right? If you look at Alma 5, where he reflects on his own father's experiences being a high priest to Noah, right? And he says, listen,
right.
This pricked his heart, and he did these things, and we should remember these things, right? And there's this pattern of like, hey, remember the good stuff that's happened. We remember the bad stuff that's happened, and we see where the blessings have come from. What's been the source of that, right? And maybe that's the trick, right? Because you're right, John. I mean, I had this talk with Ricky the other day. I'm like, Sydney is on a mission. She's going to come home from her mission, and literally 2 days later, John, she has to go to Provo to go to school, right? So we're going to see her for 2 days.
Right.
And I said, the day that she left on her mission was the last day that she was a resident in our house. Now moving forward, she's a guest in our house. And
right.
makes me sad, But at the same time, you know, we've spent 18 or 19 or 20 years modeling, like you were referencing earlier, this example. We just model what we think is the best way to do things, and we hope that some seeds take root, and then we cross our fingers and water those seeds, right?
John, can I ask this question? John, can I ask you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is not the first episode where the word remember has come up as an important ingredient in that success, right? And in the winning the battles we want to win. How do you remember? How do you retain in remembrance maybe what God has done for you? You know, the times that you've been delivered, the times that you've been blessed. How do you, what strategies or what things do you have in your life that help you remember?
All right, that's a deep question, Mike. And I have to, when I reflect on that question, I really have to think that it really is. It's interesting. We are incredible about being selective in our memories of ourselves growing up. And we always kind of remember the good time. I think that's how, our survival mode.
That's how we survive, right?
That's how we survive, right? And we kind of forget the times that maybe we weren't the people that we are now, so to speak. And I think it's when you really take the time, and whether people want to call it meditation or prayer, it can be whatever it may be, but just reflect on, it's important to remind ourselves daily of the things we're grateful for, of what are we grateful for, and what are we trying to accomplish. And I look at that, I think with our kids, they really have to know that we love them no matter what. I don't care. I do care, but if you made a terrible decision, so be it. It's done. Let me just tell you, I love you, and we'll always pick you up. We'll always go forward and move forward. It's never a done deal. And as long as they know that our love is unconditional, and that's where we should be working, I do believe that they'll all come around, even if one goes astray. And I've always had this saying, if you have kids who have just made great decisions in life, be grateful. Be grateful.
Well, I love that it's never. I love that it's never a done deal. Right? But we're never done. We're all a work in progress.
Yeah, and I think too, John, I like that idea too. Like, for me, when I think about remembering, right, I think that for me, it's important to have people around me that will remind me. Remind me that I'm a knucklehead. Remind me that I've done dumb things. Remind me that I've done some good things, right? And I think that's important. And again, I think that's part of why Mike and I like the idea of bringing people like you on this show, is because it's an opportunity for us to remind each other, right? That, hey, we've got some good things going on in our lives right now. Even though, I may have, I've flubbed a few things, but those flubs are important too, right? Because I think about those times and I just think like, man, I never want to experience that again, but thank the good Lord that I experienced that, Right.
Failure, if you want to call it failure or those flubs or whatever, those are just learning opportunities. They're not, you only fail if you stop. Yeah. That's really, but they're really opportunities to learn. I think it was Jeff Bezos who I recently learned, they came out with that, the fire, remember the Amazon fire? Well, that was a flop as far as business goes. However, out of it came artificial intelligence and Alexis. So, things happen, even though, you may look at it, but it was a learning opportunity. And I think that's true with life, even with our kids. We never want to say we fail we haven't failed. It's not over yet. Yeah. It's an opportunity to try and correct or to learn. And if we're constantly realizing about ourselves, and I think about my personality, all right, hey, I lack in that area. So how can I get better? How can I get better? How can I take this opportunity that I may consider it a failure, but to take it to make myself a stronger person? Because in the end, that's what matters. And Tyler, I just had one of my favorite, I had to conduct a funeral recently this past week, and he was a Vietnam vet, and he was just a wonderful man, and he wasn't, LDS or a member of the church, but he, we had some honest conversations as he was dying, and it gives you a glimpse in the person that we're mortal. We are going to end this journey. I mean, and then we're going to start another journey, but this journey will have an ending, at least, and then it will go on. And when you're at that stage, you're reflecting on things that really are of importance. That what in my life, you're worried about, was I a good enough father? Was I a good enough husband? Yeah. You're not worried about, doggone it, I missed that business opportunity. I really screwed that one up.
Right.
Those things just do not cross a dying person's mind.
Yeah.
They really don't.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. I shouldn't say hopefully not.
Well, it's funny,
it's these things that,
I have a sister who's struggling, right? She's struggled for a long time. And we were having a group text mess. And my mom has said to me many times, what did I do wrong? And I always tell my mom, you didn't do anything wrong, right? It's people have choices, they make choices. And sometimes we choose to learn the difficult way rather than the easy way. But today in this text exchange with my sister and some other members of the family, she quoted Love One Another, the song, every word of it. She typed it out into the text and sent it. And I thought, I texted my mom. I said, small victory. You did it. She remembered, right? She remembered. But I think that's important, right? We teach, and then the choices have to be made on the individual level. And then when if they reach that point where they're grasping for those things that they recognized when they were younger as foundational or stabilizing pieces in their life, I think they start to come back into focus.
John, so looking back on things, is there a truth that you hold in your possession right now that you learned the hard way?
That I've learned the hard way?
Yeah.
I think I've got a lot of those, Mike, so I'm trying to figure out which one I want to share with you. You can, and we're going to go back to the beginning. You can never exhibit enough compassion for people, Mike. I have been in my life, I think, and I've gotten much better as I've gotten older, quick to judge. Well, I know the answer to that. When you're young, you think you're smart, right?
Right.
As you're old, you realize you're like, I just danced through a minefield, and I didn't really know what I was doing.
Well, everything was so binary when you're young, right?
Yes.
Good and bad.
Yes.
Black, white.
Yes.
You don't see the layers. You don't see the wrinkles.
Right. You don't see. I've learned that, as people, Mike Freeman and Tyler Gould, you guys are made up of experiences. And you're on this journey to be better people, like all of us. And there's going to be stumbles, and it's not right for me to judge a stumble of, not you guys haven't stumbled, but to judge a stumble on somebody else, but stumble on somebody else's part when I've stumbled, and I think that's one thing I've learned is you could replace that judgment with love and compassion, because that's really what's going to make you a better person. That's really what you want people to do with, for you or for anybody else, or for your children to look at other people, to say, look and see them for deeper than just the surface. Why does that person think that way? Or why? Well, gosh, and I think I was sensitive to that because, I saw parents who were very labored in a very, like I said, my mother worked in a prune field, but she was one of 14 children. and they were darker skinned. And as we talked about, there was discrimination. Back in the 50s and the 40s, you might as well have been black, if you were dark skinned. And I saw it growing up, but my dad was Caucasian and white. And so it was very, very interesting to see both sides of that. But I think that helped me develop a lot of compassion. In fact, I know it did. And people don't know, and to see where they've come, how far they came along, from my mom to, having being raised, and as she talked about issues, where, because of the stress, they were beat as children, and then she realized, hey, I don't want to be like that. I want something to change. And they weren't members of the church or anything. Nobody, but, and she realized herself, and I just gained great admiration that said, I'm going to raise my family different. She decided. And where some people could have taken it and converted it into anger and repeated that same
The choice was hers. The choice was hers to make.
Right. The choice was hers to make. And I think that's the same with us. Really, my goal as a parent is that my children, that I can keep that ball going forward, down the field, that they're better than me. That's what I would consider myself a success as a parent. If they're not going to be perfect, they're going to have their shortcomings, but I would love that for them to be better than me. That doesn't mean finance. That just means as a person.
Well, I love your answer, John, and I appreciate the thought you put into that. It makes me think of a man that we all admire. I remember serving with Kent Wiseman.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And Kent Wiseman was our stake president, and he was outgoing. So after 10 years of serving this community, he had learned some things, and he shared in a pretty intimate setting with me in the room things that he had learned through this service. And top of the list was, we've got it wrong when we try to understand how much God loves his children.
Man, yeah.
Like we've got it wrong because we've made judgment and we don't know just how powerful that love is and just how much love will be present whenever Judgment Day is, right? Whatever that looks like, whatever judgment bar, right? Whatever you have in your mind, you don't have the ability to understand God's love that is in that room when that is happening. And then he made this note, and then he says, especially when it comes to his wayward children. And just mic drop, right? Like, wow, that moment, I'll never forget that. So when you say compassion, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, is we don't mortally have the ability to understand that kind of love.
And I think that's why, right, context and nuance is so important, right? That when we look at people, we don't just take a snapshot of what we see right in front of us. It's important to have a little context and understand the nuances of life, and that will lead to some compassion, right? I think we would all hope, at least me, I'll speak personally, I sure hope people look at me and base their judgment on a series of things rather than the one thing I said that when I put my foot in my mouth, which is it's like once. That's multiple times, right?
It's like the story from the scriptures, right? Where the guy has forgiven his debt, and then he goes and demands repayment from somebody who owes him, and it's like, do you understand the game here?
Yeah.
Right? We want to be treating other people with that grace and mercy that we ourselves need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Be careful walking around with a measuring stick, because you're going to be measured by that same stick.
Exactly right. It's really, because you look at, in Redding here, and I'm sure you have it, Tyler, in San Diego, you drive by and you see some of these poor people on the street, and you do want to quickly judge them or something, but you don't know how did they grow up? What happened? They were somebody's baby. By God's grace, we were born to parents who at least showed us the light and the right way to go. They didn't.
Yeah.
So how do you, that's a heavenly, or God's going to make that all fair, but it's very incumbent that we, when you talk about compassion and all of those qualities that we're all trying to develop, that that's why, you know, it doesn't mean that you accept what they're, but you look at them, you're like, we don't know what they had, what circumstances they were in, or what they had to, that you don't know where they were born or
And
how
in my
they were, you know,
mind,
raised.
in my mind, I always feel like I could go to them and they could tell you where it went wrong. Right? They could tell you where they didn't make rent one month and they fell short, and you know, and they just needed a break that never came. And I know that's not the situation with everyone, and there's mental health and there's veterans and there's substance abuse and there's all those things.
Right.
But you're right. Like, we don't know what went down there, but we just know we want to roll up our window and not give them $5.
Right.
Because they're going to go drinking. Of course they're going to go drinking, right? We're just we're judging.
We're judging. Yeah.
We're always judging. I
love John's point though, because I always think about this, John. Like when I'm in that situation, I always think like he was 10 years old at one point in time, had no care in the world, like life was great, right? And then here he is. I mean, it's a heartbreaker, you know, and so that gives me a little bit of compassion every once in a while.
So John, one of the things that I'm always wondering as I interact with some of these people, that we've just got amazing people in our lives, Tyler, right? We've talked about that before, and John's one of those people. Everybody's dealing. Everybody's dealing with something. Now we all hate the burdens that we're carrying, but by golly, when compared to other people's burdens, we'd go running back to our pile of troubles anytime, right? Because they're known. And a lot of them, you know, it was just a comfortable load. If everybody's dealing, I'm curious, when we talk to the richest men in town and we talk about that life, how do you deal, John? How do you deal?
How do I deal with life?
Yeah, when life gets hard, and we've talked about kind of hard being the default these days. So how do you keep your faith? How do you keep going forward? You know, we talked about that failures of learning, and how do you do those things? Because you do. And I'm not talking theoretical here. I'm looking at a man who models this for me, and I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, I'm in a spot where I'm looking on the trail and I'm looking at John Crosby to show me the trail, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know, how do you deal?
Yeah, you think about your title is very appropriate. You know, Potter monetarily was the richest man in town.
Yeah.
We love the irony. We love the irony of that moment.
Yeah. What made George Bailey, you know, rich, and he had to be shown that by you know, how much he did have influence, and people were better because of George Bailey and that he was born. I get through hard things, Mike. You know, when you say you go back to your own troubles, I've learned to serve. When times are very difficult, help other people. Get outside yourself. If you sit and you wallow in your own troubles or misery, you just make things worse than they really are. Yeah. If you go out and you help someone, you know, and there's always people that need help, you realize, I've got it pretty good. You know, I've got a loving wife. I've got wonderful children. You know, you think, hey, I know who I am. I know what my purpose is here in this life. And as you serve people, there's just a happiness that comes, a contentment and a gratitude. And that's, to me, the only way that you can get through difficult times. Personally, that's my opinion, that it is about getting outside of yourself and helping other people.
You know, I think of that modeled in the life of the Savior. You know, it was never easy for him. And when he finds out that John the Baptist was beheaded and he wants to get away to a deserted place, and he's with his disciples and he's just trying to process, and the people come and the multitude comes, and the disciples say, it's late in the day. You want us to turn them away? And he says, no. He's like, well, what are we going to do? It's like, we're going to feed him. What do we got? got a couple loaves, couple fish, you know? And I think that he teaches us there in that moment that service really does defeat sadness, that when we are in this mess, that service really does help put things in perspective. Because George Bailey, none of his circumstances changed.
Right.
And that's why we love the story. But our circumstances don't have to change, and we can yet, amidst those circumstances, find joy, find happiness, and find life's rich blessings. So, yeah, good thought.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. I have my 10-year-old. She has a tendency to pick up on the negative, and she said that she'll come home from school. Yeah, it's a gift. And she says, I say, how was school today, Gwendolyn? And she says, it's the worst day ever. And I say, this is my go-to now. I say, all right, well, before you can tell me about the worst day ever, you got to tell me 5 good things that happened at school today, and then we'll talk about the worst thing that happened, right? And by the end of the 5th, the worst thing that happened, you know, where someone cut in front of you in line for the jump rope, it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal, right? And so I love that thought, John, that you serve others, you start thinking about the blessings that you have in your own life, and that sort of changes. It changes. It doesn't stop the rain, but it allows you to look at the rain in a different way, right? And I love that. So, you know, John, what this show is called, The Richest Men in Town, for a reason, and we, you know, we love that idea. We've talked about it a lot tonight. The idea that I think sometimes the world thinks about the richest man in town. They might be thinking about Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or some other people. But when Mike and I think about the richest men in town, you know, we have a list, and you're on that list. But John, what does it mean for you to be the richest man in town?
To be surrounded by love. That may sound, but to really, truly good friends like you and Mike, family who adores you, you know, your children, a wife, a loving wife. That to me is the richest man in town. Because if money were the measure of happiness, then there seems to be a lot of unhappy people in Hollywood. A lot of nobody who had any.
And you can never have enough.
You can never have enough.
Right.
Right. You can never have enough. And it's finding joy and happiness in the simple things in life. You know, when we look back and throughout history, who are the happiest people? Who really did find happiness? Mike, I know that you served in South America. And I'm sure you saw extremely impoverished situations. Yet you probably saw happy and contented families and people struggling.
Who would give you everything they had? Yeah,
absolutely. And when I've traveled, it's one of the things that strikes me the most to certain areas like that is like when one time I was in the Philippines, you realize how happy they were. And it wasn't based on money. It was based on their family. You know, it was based on their relationship with each other. And I think that to me, it's humbling. It's a lesson that we need to learn, because in Western society, we tend to lose track of that. And we tend to convert it, you know, through this skillful marketing of a lot of things, social media and television and, you know, movies, that happiness is being in Tahiti, laying on the beach in Tahiti. While fun, yes.
Right.
But is that going to be the true measure of your happiness? No, it's not. And I think it's always stepping back and being reflective on those on what really brings you joy. And if it's material things, you'll always be chasing those. You'll never catch enough. You just can't. Somebody's always going to have more than you. Somebody's always going to be richer than you. Somebody's always going to have a better toy than you. You'll never catch it. You know, you won't catch it. You'll chase it always. And so, yeah, that's kind of a roundabout answer to your question. Probably didn't answer the question, but
that's a perfect answer, John. I love it. And I think that, if you're right. I agree with you 100%. The idea of surrounding ourselves with love and really trying to build and foster those relationships. I mean, right. If we can go back, I think we've referenced, It's a Wonderful Life 100 times tonight, but we can go back at that closing scene. And when Harry toasts George as the richest man in town, why was that? That room was filled with people that loved him. And that's a perfect answer, John. I love it.
Well, and I love it too. And when you talk about the material things, we leave those behind. But I have a testimony that everything that's laced with love comes with us.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we take.
That's what we'll carry.
Yeah.
That's what we'll be waiting for. That's who will be waiting for us. Right. Are those loved ones. And everything that we've done in charity in this life is going to be on the books. And I can't thank you enough, John, for adding to tonight. I think Tyler and I, actually the three of us have edified each other. And I think we walk away better men tonight. So we have you to thank for that. So I don't have a glass, but we would raise one, right? And a toast to you, John, for the life that you're living, for your family. Give your wife a hug for us, because we just took an hour on a Saturday, and I know that's
on a Monday.
It's not a Saturday. It's quarantine mode. I don't even know what day it is. What day
Wow. Life of a teacher, huh? Summer break. Here we go.
We'll edit that part out.
Okay.
Well, listen, John, you're a good friend, and we're grateful for your friendship, and we love you. We appreciate you, and I feel lucky to have you in my life on any level. So thanks for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you, guys. I admire both of you. You're truly, you talk about love. It's your friendship and love. Those are priceless, guys, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, it's good. We've spent an hour talking, but just so you know, in my mind, as we're talking, a million memories have come through my mind.
Amen.
And I just think of those times, and I appreciate those times, and I'm holding them pretty dear right now. So thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
all right.
Have a good night.
All right.
Go live your life, man.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother George, the richest man in town.